Jeannie, can you hear this? Can you hear this? Jeannie. Okay, so we should probably turn up the speaker a little bit. Yes, but good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Voices at the Table and happy Pride Month. Woo! Pride Month! It's fun. Fun fact, Texas actually has two different Pride Months. We have this Pride Month, and then we also have September as our Pride Month, at least up in Dallas. That's when we have our Pride Parade. It's really not a good time to have a Pride Parade either way because it's just so hot already. Yes. So let's get to it. So today we have Shannon Fitzpatrick and we have Cyrus Gray III here to talk about criminal injustice within the prison system in Texas. I'll let them introduce themselves and let's get started. I'm very excited to have you guys here. And by the way, Cyrus is a really great 9-pin bowler. Oh yeah, I need to do that. Okay. We're just gonna do the regular words. So life is a gift for which we are grateful. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and the mysteries of this great gift. Should we do the covenant too, or no? No, yeah, I think we're fine. Okay, yep. And so the flame is lit.
My name is Shannon Fitzpatrick. I am from San Marcos and I am still a practicing attorney here in town. Prior to that, I retired from the university as the director of the Office of Attorney for Students. Prior to that, I was a prosecutor here in San Marcos. And prior to that, I was assistant general counsel for the Texas Department of Public Safety. I was originally coming out of college a school teacher, but then I quit to do something easier like law school. So that's a little bit of my background on this. I have been involved with issues regarding our criminal legal system for many years. I've watched college students approach the system so entirely different at times, depending on what your background is. And the consequences can be horrifically different. Our system needs a lot of work. It needs input from people like us, and we're working to make it better. And here is Cyrus Gray, who's going to start us off.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Cyrus. I'm from Houston. I came to San Marcos to go to Texas State as a student athlete. In 2018, I was arrested and wrongfully incarcerated for the capital murder of Justin Gage. Me and my brother Devontae, a few of you have been very present through that whole process. And thank you so much for all the help and prayers and everything that you did to support me and that you're doing to support Devontae through this process. So I work with Mano Amiga now. I do live in San Marcos now. I'm working to do criminal justice reform, and I'm working to get back into Texas State for law school. And I also plan on running for city council. So that's a little bit about me. Yeah. Thank you. I'm going to stand up because I may have to push buttons. So we're here to talk about justice. I'm going to cover a few things, and then Shannon's going to wrap it up because she's a lot smarter than me. So the things I'm going to cover, I'm going to talk about court watching, a judicial scorecard, Devontae Emerson, because his case is still going on, and community and reentry resources, because that's a big part of my work right now. I'm working on resources for reentry for people coming out of the carceral system, but also resources for struggling community members. So starting off with court watching, a few of you have been court watching before. I know for my experience, I remember the faces. And court watching is a big thing. Court watching kind of levels the playing field for a defendant. And that showed in my personal experience. And it also showed in a gentleman's experience who I just witnessed a trial, what happens when there isn't that support. So for me, I had a strong support system from the community, my loved ones, my family, and a jury saw me as a person, and the judge saw me as a person. For this gentleman, I sat through his trial. His trial lasted a whole of 7 hours. He was found guilty. He went through a punishment phase that lasted about 3 to 4 days, and he ended up receiving 40 years in prison for 2 phone calls while he was sitting in jail wrongfully. While I was court watching, a lot of things happened. I was assaulted by the ADA. I filed assault bodily injury charges against him. I was antagonized and threatened by detectives. I was almost banned from the courthouse just because I was there watching, and because detectives were uncomfortable with testifying with me there watching. So I invite you all to come court watch, and I strongly hope that you all do go court watch because it levels the playing field. It holds the judge more accountable. It causes the DA to be more by the book the way they're supposed to, and it causes lawyers to be more accountable. It's a very different dynamic when there's nobody here for the accused. You've been accused, you've already lost. If you really look at the system, you've been accused, you've already lost. When we see people on TV, on the news, it shows all the worst things when they're accused of something. And our first mindset is, dang, we believe it. Naturally, we just do believe it. So you've already lost. So when you're going to court regularly and there's no support here and your defense does not have your best interests and the state only cares about a conviction and this judge only sees you as this charge on this piece of paper that's in front of him, it's a very, very bad situation. So court watching kind of levels the playing field in that way. And moving on to the judicial scorecard, I think that's very important. There's in other states, they have what's called Rate My Judge. I haven't seen anything like that in Texas, but pretty much it's they'll have volunteers to go court watch, and they'll have a little survey, and they just rate. They just answer the survey to see if the judge is doing things the way that they're supposed to see if it's unbiased and fair at the trial. I think that's a very important thing to implement here in Hayes County because we have a court system where judges are more inclined to look the other way and just let it play out, whether it's right or not. So with that, judicial scorecard is just another level of accountability for these people, you know. Courthouses are public, and you should feel safe anytime that you go there. My court watching experience was not that. I did not feel safe. I did not feel secure. When I went in, I felt a whole lot of trauma. I felt a whole lot of rage, but I didn't act on those feelings. I was an observer, just here to watch. The very first day that I went back to the courthouse, I hadn't been to the courthouse in months just because life and just, everyday things, trying to get readjusted. The very first day I went back, the ADA stopped everything he was doing to argue with me in the hallway as I was speaking to a family. This lady stops me and she's like, "Hey, my son is in there. He's been there since he was 16. I don't know what to do." And I'm talking to her, and the ADA walks by. And he overhears the conversation, and he stops, and he turns around, and he's like, "Do we have a problem?" And I'm like, "Whoa, I don't know." So he walks up on me, and he's like, "What are you doing here? What are you even doing here?" And I said, "Well, sir, I'm not in jail anymore, for one. It's a public courthouse. I don't have to tell you why I'm here. I can be here. I'm just here watching." And then he goes, "Well, you're an asshole." And I said, "And you're a coward." I said, "You literally just stopped everything that you're doing at your place of employment to come bicker with me." A day or so later, he assaults me in my back while I'm standing in the courtroom. And then he goes on, after assaulting me, to go to Joshua Wright's family to let them know that the officer that shot their loved one in the back more than 5 times will likely only receive a year or 2 of probation that can be removed off of his record. This is what happened at the courthouse. Just a few weeks ago, Malachi Williams was also shot in the back. So from those experiences and my experience, my perspective of the state of Texas and Hayes County and SMPD is that they are very willing to attack and harm you while your back is turned. Because when this ADA hit me in the back, it was completely unprovoked. I'm just standing there. He comes in, assaults me, and then moves on with his day to go make a verdict in somebody's case. When I was in the gentleman who received 40 years trial, as I'm sitting there, the DA for his trial stops this man's entire trial. The judge allows this because a detective walks in, and on his way in, there's a jury here and everything. On his way in, he says, "There's no way I'm taking the stand while he's here." Speaking about me, "There's no way I'm taking the stand while he's here. I'm not going to put up with him. You need to get him out of here." So the proceeding judge and this DA decide to have a voir dire hearing about my presence in this courtroom. And the whole time I'm sitting there, and the only thing that's going on in my mind is the fact that this man is on trial. Like, his life is on the line right now. This detective's entrance just changed the whole dynamic of his fate, because this is a detective that is here to testify as an expert witness. And he's walked into this courtroom and made a scene about me being here watching. I'm sitting behind the defendant. So now you just put a paradigm in the jury's head, not just of who I am, but who this defendant is, based off of how this detective has reacted to his support. So the jury is asked to leave the room. The detective takes the stand, and they have a voir dire hearing. The DA asks him, "So what happened between you and Mr. Gray in the hallway?" The detective says, "Well, Mr. Gray walked by antagonizing and threatening and scaring other officers and detectives in the hallway. So I don't feel like he should be here." So I raise my hand and I say, "Your Honor, can I take the stand if we're going to speak about my presence, and we're going to stop this man's entire trial to talk about my presence? Can I speak?" The judge said no. I said, "Well, can I approach?" The judge said yes. When I walked up, the judge tells me, "I don't want to have to kick you out of here." And I said, "Well, why would you have to kick me out of here?" And the judge proceeds to say, "Well, you're threatening people, you're scaring jurors, you're doing all these outlandish things." And I said, "Well, Your Honor, I didn't do anything wrong. I walked by the detectives in the hallway because they all happened to be involved in my case. They stared at me, they antagonized me, they smirked at me. And as I was sitting in the hallway, this same detective that is here to testify as an expert witness in this man's trials looked at me and said, 'Hey, do you remember me? Do you know who I am? You don't know who I am. What's my name? Tell me. You don't know who I am.' So how am I the person that's antagonizing anyone here? Just a few days ago, your ADA assaulted me and had a verbal altercation with me in a hallway, unprovoked. If I cannot come to a courthouse and feel safe like everybody else, that's a problem. So with that being said, I invite you guys to come court watch, not just for justice and fairness, but for my safety, because I can't go court watch alone. It's not safe for me. The judicial scorecard holds a heavy weight on. Whoa. Whoa. I also want to get all of your emails when this is done so I can send you this scene about my co-watching experience. But the judicial scorecard holds heavy weight on these judges. Like, any chance you can get to have more accountability, it makes a difference, because like human nature, the more that you do something, the more you get used to it, the more you get oblivious to the bad acts in it. That's just human nature. That's why we have accountability. That's why we talk to each other. That's why we need community. That's why we need real people that are willing to have the hard conversations. Moving on to my reentry work. So since I've been home and overcome my situation, I've been very active in the community with struggling people. And I found that the solution to a lot of problems that we're funding police to solve is really just community, like just community support, just being there for one another. You know, there's a young man that I would see walking to a gas station every day for like a week, walking. It was hot. He's walking like 10, 15 minutes every day. One day I was like, "Hey man, you want to ride?" Gave him a ride. Gave him my number. I was like, "Hey, whenever you're going to work, call me. If I'm not doing nothing, I'll give you a ride." I started giving this man a ride every other day to work. Very quiet car ride. We don't know each other, just quiet. Give him a ride, drop him off, going about my business. Eventually, I got to know the man. It's a young man who was a student here as well. He got caught up dealing with drugs. He had a charge for that. He's on probation. He's dealing with that process. He's actively homeless because of his circumstance. He can't find employment because he has this drug charge. He was a user, and he has mental instabilities, which is why he became a user. But the more that I interacted with him, the more that I spoke with him, the more that I saw that, hey, this is just somebody that needed help. And now he's doing a lot better. He's not depressed. He's not thinking negative thoughts. He's actively going to events to volunteer. He's actively trying to elevate his circumstance. Along the way, he's speaking positivity to other people. Total different dynamic from when I met him. But just simple things like that you can do every day is what makes a difference in the community. A lot of people are struggling with housing resources, employment, just everyday thing. Since I've been home, I've taken 15 people in this community that I don't know from anywhere to DPS to get IDs, to get social security cards, to get these everyday things that you would think people would know how to get or would have, but they just don't have the access or resources to go do that. I've given people rides to work, just all kinds of things that's very feasible. We have a cart system in town. How hard would it be for a cart system to have a program to where they're providing these rides just to community members, just to get to work, to get home, to go to the emergency room, whatever the case may be. So the reentry work that I'm working on currently is to bring those type of resources for transportation, for employment, for housing, for mental and physical health services that people may need. Devontae is still going through this case. Devontae Emerson, my brother, he's still dealing with this case. This is a case that everybody has seen to be very flawed and wrong. Amy Kemp just released an article a week or so ago talking more about this case, talking about the fact that there are 3 other suspects, 2 of which confessed to the crime. And there were other people who came outside of these suspects telling the police, SMPD, hey, we know who did this. This is what happened. 2 of the 3 suspects both gave their phones over to SMPD with evidence in it that was never looked over. So you have all these things that happened, and they decided, hey, let's go after Cyrus Gray and Devontae Emerson because we were out of town. That was the level of professionalism and just care for this case way back in 2015, and it's the same thing now, because regardless of all of these known factors, our DA is still trying to prosecute Devontae Emerson. But he's not going to prosecute our ADA for assaulting me with my back turned, which was made very clear to me when I asked him about it. He tells me, have you heard the story? Well, the story is you were blocking the doorway from our ADA from entering the courtroom, so he had to shimmy by you to get in. And I said, sir, are you telling me that I was blocking a door in this open courtroom with everybody else in here, me alone, I'm blocking the door, and your ADA decided that instead of, if I am blocking the door, instead of, hey, excuse me, or oh my God, can I get by? He decided it was appropriate to hit me as hard as he could in my back to get by because I was blocking the door. He goes, no, that's not the story. I said, that's your story. It's my story, whatever you want to call it, that's what it is. But this is the level of professionalism and care that I'm seeing in the courthouse when I go court watch, and I'm seeing from SMPD and detectives. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. That's what I have for you guys today. Just, giving you my experience with my limited knowledge and just what I've gone through in the community and what I've seen. Your community is crying for help, for support, for unity, and they're not seeing that. They're not believing in that, and they don't think they're receiving that. And when you're in a mind state of lacking of, you feel so low that you can't even fathom reaching out for help or how to ask for help because you feel so low. So it becomes a situation where it's on your community, your tribe, to come together and help you, recognize that, speak up for you, this community, this tribe came together and helped me in my darkest times. I'm just encouraging guys to continue to do that for everybody that you see in this community.
You were incarcerated for a total of 5 years without any real evidence. And isn't it true that they arrested you a year after the fact?
They arrested me nearly 3 years after Judge Engage's murder. I was at work in Houston. I worked at a physical therapy facility, Village Family Practice Physical Therapy in Houston. As I'm setting up a table, I just finished up with a patient. I'm setting up the table for the next patient. 7 guys in military gear with assault rifles and lasers come in with their guns pointed at me and tell me not to move. Why would I move? That's crazy. There's a bunch of guns pointing at me. They tell me not to move. They come walk up on me. They grab me, put me in handcuffs, walk me through the whole building for all of these doctors and patients who have invited me to their home to set up their Christmas lights because they're just too elderly and can't risk doing that. People that have invited me to their children's graduations and birthdays for them to see me in a totally different light. I was the youngest kid at this facility, and I was the only Black kid at this facility. So everybody thought highly of me because, I was doing really well for myself, had a very good mind, and that totally changed. I went back to that job for the first time just for closure 2 months ago. When I walked in, you could feel the fear of my presence here. And this is nearly 5-6 years after the fact, That's what that did to my image and to all these people. And that's what that did to my image to a lot of my family members. I've been reconnecting with a lot of people since I've been here. A lot of my family believed it, They believed it. They believed it. They treated my mother badly. They blamed her. The lady that drove 3+ hours here every court date with a pair of clothes and shoes, hoping that I would come home. And my first lawyer would tell her, "What are you doing here? Your son's never coming home. Why don't you just convince him to take a plea deal?" She got in 2 car accidents coming to see me. And that's what she would receive when she came here, So, yeah, it was a terrible process. It was a terrible situation. But I don't regret going through the process or going through the situation because it allows me to present it to people that care to see, and I speak about it a lot, not to complain, but to advocate because these things are happening and they are continuing to happen. That gentleman that got a 40-year prison sentence, before that, a year or so ago, his girlfriend, who was very mentally ill, he helps her with her medication and all types of things. She had an episode. She had a very abusive, traumatizing relationship before him where this guy was beating her really bad, like doing the worst of things. The guy ended up committing suicide. He was just that bad with it. So she had an episode and she would tell people, "Hey, I've been diagnosed with these things since 13. Sometimes when I have episodes, I black out and I don't know what happens." She has an episode, she blacks out. She calls the police and says that this guy, her spouse at the time, was beating her and stole from her. Immediately after, she calls him and she's like, "I'm so sorry. I don't know what I did, but this thing happened." She goes to the district attorney to do the paperwork for the non-prosecution and all that. She lets them know her medical history, her mental illness and all that. Doesn't matter. The gentleman turns himself in. He's being very cooperative, same thing. Doesn't matter. They put charges on him. He sits in jail for months. He pays for an attorney. He's a business owner on the square. Not anymore, but he was a business owner on the square. He pays for an attorney. They get him out. They eventually drop all the charges that were put on him due to her episode because it was bogus. However, because he called her to check on her 2 times while he was sitting in jail for these bogus charges, they charged him with violating a protective order. And that's what they took him to trial on and gave him a 40-year sentence for 2 phone calls. Yeah. Once he came home the first time when he had to bond out, for a year he dealt with the case situation, and for a year SMPD detectives harassed him, harassed his employees. They raided his business multiple times. unprovoked for no reason. They raided his home to the point where they had snipers on the roof at this man's house because they believed that this girl who has been advocating crazy in his support since the original charges was in danger. And instead of hearing her and listening to her, they decided we were taking it into our own hands and move accordingly. Even the district attorney on her case, they treated her not like a victim. They treated her as a ticket to get another conviction. They did not want to hear her out at all. Not until it came to a point where they didn't have any charges to put on him. And the DA invited her to have a meeting. She asked me about it. She's like, Cyrus, I don't know if I should go here. I'm afraid of what will happen because I'm unstable. I need help. I've been off of my meds. This man is the only one that's been supporting me to make sure that I've been on my meds with my housing and all these types of things. And now he's gone. I've been off my meds. I'm afraid. And she was homeless because she lived with him. He's been in jail. He's lost his business, his livelihood. He's lost his home. He's lost years of his life. Like, this man has a 40-year prison sentence and he's in his late 30s, you know? And his spouse, she just went through hell. For somebody like that, dealing with mental issues and having to go through that type of trauma again, when all you're doing is trying to get help, especially from the people that are put in place to protect and serve, that's outrageous, you know? It's outrageous. So I invite you guys to come court watch. I invite you guys to look more into the judicial scorecard. I would love to send you guys that zine that I created and some more just quick synopsis of the work that I've been doing and continuing.
I'll give you another little story. In October of 1988, a convenience store clerk was killed in a robbery gone bad. It was at that Valero down on Old Rancho 12, just before Franklin Street and behind Wake the Dead. There were no eyewitnesses, just a grainy surveillance video of a black man with a ski mask pointing a gun at a frightened clerk. Says, give me the money. The gun goes off, the clerk dies. Within a matter of hours, San Marcos police had identified their suspect and got an arrest warrant. And great for them, he confessed. In criminal matters, a confession is called the king of evidence. It's as good as a conviction. And so it's incredulous that innocent people would incriminate themselves by confessing to something they didn't actually do. But that was Bobby Harper. He had just turned 18 a few weeks ago and was a high school dropout. Why is that? Like so many kids who have bad experiences in school, Bobby had an undiagnosed learning disability. He was teased and taunted and wanted to do anything other than go to school. The night that he was arrested, he was with his girlfriend and a nephew when he heard a banging on the door. It was the police. He knew there was a warrant out for him for truancy, and he had just smoked some pot, so he didn't want to be caught, so he hid under the bed. The SWAT team found him. Yes, a SWAT team. They took him to jail. This is at 4:30 in the morning, and started interrogating him. He initially said he didn't do it. They pushed, but in pressure from the detectives, he changed his mind. But more than 300 people, after spending months, years, even decades in U.S. prisons, have been exonerated for crimes they originally confessed to, according to the National Registry of Exonerations. That's more than 10% of the 2,500 plus recorded exonerations since 1989. People from all walks of life confess, but young people and those with mental disabilities are the most vulnerable, according to the registry. In fact, 49% of false confessions that come from people who are exonerated by DNA evidence were people under 21, according to the Innocence Project, who is a nonprofit that uses DNA evidence to free the wrongfully accused. Moreover, when people are stressed, tired, or traumatized, and talking to the police, they're much more likely to give false confessions. Bobby had been awake for over 22 hours. He was high. He was, trying to show off or whatever in front of these cops who he knew were not his friends. But the video is pretty scary. For his trial, of course, Bobby couldn't afford the $50,000 to $75,000 it would take back then to get a decent attorney. So he was appointed an attorney to represent him by a fellow by the name of John Stickles. Just a few months before, Stickles was, let's say, separated from the district attorney's office. When Bobby first met him, Bobby pleaded with him that his confession was false, he was innocent, and Stickles needed to help him fix this. Stickles' response was, "Shut the F up and let me do my job." Stickles never investigated the false confession. He never did an investigation as to where Bobby was on the night of the murder. 20-something years later, I did that investigation and found out that if Stickles had just asked, he might have found out that Bobby was at a party with 20 people when the murder was happening. That was never investigated. The attorney never asked, how did you, within hours, you see a video, they took this store video, they went back to the police department, they saw a man in a mask, and within hours, they identified Bobby Harper. Now, wouldn't you ask, how did you do it? They didn't ask, his attorney did not ever ask the question, how did you figure out that it was Bobby as opposed to 1,000 other Black men? When Bobby was asked, and this is one of my favorite parts, when Bobby was asked, he asked his attorney, my girlfriend was with me the night before. She's an alibi witness. John Stickles took him, went up to the front during his trial, stood in front of the judge and said, Bobby, I want this on the record. Bobby, I'm not going to call your girlfriend because we all know she's a liar. Now, under Texas law, that's only a decision for the jury, but this is the kind of attorney who knew he's a former prosecutor. He's going to show off to his old boss and everybody that he's got this case. Now, imagine if that was your attorney and your alibi witness, your best witness, she's outside in the hallway waiting to be called. Needless to say, he lost the case. And Stickles then went to the family. So we're going to talk more a little bit about this, about the damage to the family. He told the family, if you hire me for $15,000, then I will win your case at the third court. Now, I saw the case in about 30 seconds, said, oh, no, you can't use that. He got their life savings. They went out and borrowed from friends, did whatever they could. And he took it to the third court, and of course, he lost. And then he promised he would take it up to the Court of Criminal Appeals, the highest criminal court in Texas. He forgot to do that. And so Bobby got 2 consecutive life sentences, which is the equivalent of life without parole. Do you have that picture of me and Bobby on your? So his family was damaged beyond repair. He was very close to his mother, whose health declined, and she died pretty quickly after he had gone to prison. It had crushed her so badly, he would never see his mother again. The family didn't get treatment for their traumas. The brothers have cycled in and out of prison themselves. The father has had several strokes. He's now 63 and he can barely communicate anymore. Certainly he cannot visit his son. So what happens if you're wrongfully convicted but poor? There is an answer that more and more states are starting to use right now, and it's called a conviction integrity unit. Interestingly enough, these units were first started in Texas and Dallas County in 2007 because they had had a spate of wrongful convictions. The police had lied on hundreds of black men, and they'd gotten these by planting drugs on them. And eventually they figured that out, and the DA said, I'm gonna start this, we're gonna fix this. And he did. He started their first conviction integrity unit. Today, there's over 50 conviction integrity units based on the work of the Dallas DA. There's over 50 across the nation, including the federal government has a conviction integrity unit. In Texas, they're in Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, San Antonio, and hopefully, not too distant future, there'll be one in San Marcos in Hays County. The units report, these units report directly to the DA. They can have one person or one attorney and an investigator, or 8 or 9, just depends on the size of the county. Anybody can say, in most cases, it's a member of the public. It is a person who is a family member. It's the defendant themselves. That is who can they fill out a form and say, I want my case fixed, and this is why. It falls to me, people say, well, why should we pay for a conviction? Why do we do these wrongdoers? It's like the Pottery Barn. You broke it, you pay for it. And that's what the state of Texas has started to do in many counties. And that's what we need to do in Hays County for people like Bobby Harper, for people like Devontae Emerson, for all sorts of folks who are out there who are wrongfully accused but don't have the resources to defend themselves. When they go out, once they're in prison, they don't have access to anything. Texas will provide you an attorney at trial, but they don't really care. And they assume everything works so beautifully. And that's why we end up the way we do. So conviction integrity units, and remember, the importance of this is they will go in, you submit your form, they will go in and they will do an investigation. And sometimes they will even say that well, you're actually guilty, but the process was flawed. And they learn from that. But you got to remember, cases like Cyrus's and Devontae's and Bobby Harper's, when you take a wrongful conviction, that means the perpetrator is still out there and they go free. We know who probably did it in Bobby's case. We know who did it in Cyrus and DJ's case. But for whatever reason, the police department doesn't want to follow through with it. It makes them look bad. They get a notch in their belt when they say, hey, we solved the crime. And they are and in fairness, a lot of times they're under pressure by the public. You got to solve it. You got to solve it. There's a killer out there. There's a killer out there. We've all watched the true crime shows. You got to solve it. First 48 hours is the most important. That puts a lot of pressure on the cops. And so they'll look out there. And if you don't have a DA's office who's really willing to take the time and frankly the heat and investigate it, then that's where that's going to end up. So we're looking to try to get Hays County to look into this and explore a conviction integrity unit. There is not a cookie cutter. Not all of them are run the same way. That's okay. We can still have it fit Hays County, because we know injustice happens. You've just heard some case examples. I've seen it with the Devontae Emerson case. I've seen it from so many. For Devontae, he sat in jail for 6 years. His attorney never once said, I think we ought to investigate. Bobby Harper's case was never investigated. Read Just Mercy, the book Just Mercy. That's what happened in that case. We have, sometimes you have bad evidence by experts. We killed a guy a few years ago under Rick Perry's administration. A man named Cameron Todd Willingham was convicted and executed for killing his 2 children in a house fire. And only afterwards did they find the evidence. They said, oh, you burned this house down. And afterwards they said, oh, actually that was faulty fire science. Really, it was an accident. And once you've destroyed that life, it is too late. And that's not just executions, that's family members. That's all the members of the community. And we're doing that in Texas without taking the time to really seek justice. So as a footnote, I'd like you to know that in January of this year, John Stickles' license to practice law in the state of Texas was suspended for multiple accounts of actions that were strikingly similar to the Bobby Harper case 25 years ago. The one death penalty case Stickles handled was a young woman by the name of Lisa Coleman who said, I am innocent. And her case went from conviction to execution almost faster than any other state in Texas. She was killed because of John Stickles. And I'd like to add the lead detective in Bobby's case, a fellow by the name of Dan Mashishak, was fired by the San Marcos, not, as they can. They removed him from the police department for serious wrongdoing, because it has to be really serious. They don't do that lightly. So the attorney's license has been suspended, the detective has been fired, and yet Bobby Harper, who is one of the nicest people I've met in a very long time, he's a sweetheart, and he's dealing with the horrors of the Texas prison system. He still sits there. And likely this summer, he will sit in an unair-conditioned prison, and I want to get him home alive. But this summer is supposed to be the hottest on record. They have these cells without windows. The interior temperature at some of them the heat index has reached 145 degrees. That is the Texas prison system. We ought to do everything we can to make sure that we don't send off people into a system like that, first of all. And second of all, the ones that do have to go to prison, who have to be separated from society, we don't bake their brains out, and we don't have them. They estimate as many as 200 people died in our prisons out of the 150,000 men and women who are there. So this is something that we have to address, and that we can start it, but start your activism at the local level. Start with, all you have to do to be a court watcher is sit in the courtroom and just watch. As Cyrus is an example, that he freaks people out just by sitting there. That's all you need. You don't have to get up and chant or do anything else. You sit there and you say, I'm watching you. And that will do a tremendous amount. It doesn't take much, but it does require good people to sit up and say, you know what? Enough is enough. I don't accept what the judge is doing in this case, allowing attorneys like this who are completely incompetent. I'm not accepting what the prosecutors are doing. Enough is enough. And it doesn't take much for us to change things. Hopefully, with your support, we will be eventually talking to our commissioner's court about funding a conviction integrity unit, and we will start righting some wrongs. Are there any questions? Yeah, everybody goes, when we're done, everybody goes, we have that effect on people, sorry. Yes.
How do we get information about the trials that we might want to go watch?
I'll let you answer that.
So the question was, how do we get information about the trials and things to go watch? You can find out on the Hays County Court Records website, but to make it easier for you, Mano Amiga will put together an upcoming trial list and we'll have it sent out. So, like I said before I started, I would like to get you guys this email because I want to share this scene and some of my other work with you. So once we do have the emails, that'll be the way that I'll get the information.
Website, maybe?
Yes, they're rebuilding the website right now. So that may not be a right now thing, but I'll definitely have them do that too. Mm-hmm.
Would you like us to pass a piece of paper on people to put that?
Oh, yes, please. Yes, please. Yes, please. I will say another note on bad defense. Devontae Emerson's original attorney still has not turned over a case file for his case to his new attorney.
How long is it?
He was on his case for over 5 years. He was on his case up until 2 months before Devontae was released, I believe, which was this past December. So for over 5 years, you did absolutely no work. He has no case file for this man's case. Where are these tax dollars going? Into bad policing, into vindictive prosecutors, detectives that are so sure of themselves that they can't see past themselves. Things like that. Oh, I thought that was the baby.
Yes. Yes, yeah, we have a bail system to where if you're arrested and you can't afford a bond, then you're put in jail until such time as you can either get enough people to put up bond money to assure that you show up to court, or you get, most of the time, in a lot of cases, if you're wealthy enough, if you're an outstanding member of the community, you get something called a personal recognizance bond. And so it just says, well, we know you'll show up to court. The problem with bond amounts to say that in order to get you to show up to court, I want you to pay $5,000. They do this if you get arrested for DWI. Automatic bond, $5,000, and you only have to pay 10%, $500. You all have $500 in your back pocket, right? Imagine if you were poor. No, so you sit in jail. Somebody like Elon Musk, if he's required to post a $100,000 bond, he spends that in a weekend in Barbados. So it is not done in relationship to what you can afford, what would make a serious impact in your life. They tend to set just flat amounts, which is why those don't work. They don't look into your finances. They don't say, oh, you're a poor person, so we're only going to do a little bit to encourage you to show up to court, or you're a wealthy person, you're going to go down. They just hit certain numbers and say, well, you're a bad person, so it's going to be $100,000. What was your bond after you got it?
I had no bond until after. I had no bond until after nearly 3 weeks of a capital murder trial that ended in a mistrial and then sitting in jail for 3 to 4 more months. The whole time I was in jail, I had no bond. A recommendation by the detective on my case. That's another thing that I think is weird. Detectives are given the power here to make the decision on people's bonds. Not just in my case, like there's 5 other people that I've spoken to, and they're like, yeah, on my paperwork, the detective recommended that I have no bond, or the detective recommended that my bond be this high. Like that just doesn't sound right to me in my mind. Like I don't think detectives are supposed to be setting bonds for people. But yeah, I had no bond the whole time until months after my trial. And when I did get a bond, it was $250,000. So I sat in jail for a few more months and then had a bond hearing, and the bond was reduced to $75,000. And thanks to Shannon, Mano, and my family, friends that were involved, I was able to get out. Devontae's bond, when he got a bond, he received a bond when I did after my trial. His bond was set to $500,000, only because he had not gone to trial yet. And the sad part about that is that when you're in jail, you haven't been proven guilty of anything in most cases. You're just here because you literally can't afford to get out. You've been accused of something. There's nothing that has proved you did this, but you have to sit here and now pay for your freedom. And then once you pay for that freedom, you have to continue to check in. You have to continue to pay attorney fees. You have to continue to actively fight and sacrifice of yourself to prove that you didn't do something that you were accused of.
And I'd like to add, he was on an ankle monitor. How much do you think that costs a month?
So my ankle monitor fee, my loved ones are paying $185 every 2 weeks for the ankle monitor. Yeah.
So that is for people, this is somebody who's out of jail. So, it's not like he's going to go get a job real quick that he can afford over $300 a month. That's 3M making a lot of money off of these ankle monitors. Eventually that gets waived and the county picks up the bill. And so we're getting screwed over as taxpayers. Yes.
Is there no limitation on how long they can hold?
The question is there any limitation on how long they can hold you? In the United States Constitution, we are given a number of benefits and civil rights, and among those is the right to a speedy trial. Typically, if you look at the case law, anybody who's been incarcerated without trial, maybe as long as a year, you can petition to have a speedy trial. And you go on the record, and sometimes they'll say, no, we need to do more investigation, whatever the reasoning is. But your attorney, after a year in jail of no trial, should be asking for a trial as a constitutional right. That was never done in the case. After 6 years, that was not done in the Devontae Emerson case. Was it ever done with yours?
No, it was not done in my case either. However, Devontae and I both filed for a speedy trial after our first year of incarceration. If you look at our court dockets, you'll see that we both filed for a speedy trial. Yeah, I filed, and it was filed ex parte. We filed for a speedy trial more than 5 times throughout the process of being incarcerated. More than 5 times. And because we filed that many times, that was a part of the ammunition that was helped to overcome my case. Now, if you don't file for a speedy trial, you can't make an argument that your speedy trial rights are being violated. That's a part of the kicker. I mean, most people don't know these things. Like, you don't know that you have to do this for the right thing to happen with your situation. You don't know that you have to pay attention to the laws and your way your lawyer is talking to you for you to get justice. Because when you're accused of something and you're in jail, you're in survival mode the whole time because it's scary, it's traumatizing. Not because of the people that you're around, but because of just the whole psychosis of what you're going through. I went to court many times where the night before or 2-3 days before, I'm in my cell, like learning, like practicing what I'm going to say, what I'm going to do, how am I going to go in here, what can I bring up to my lawyer, all these things. And then when I got to court, I froze because it's that frightening, like, so you're not thinking, man, I need to file for a speedy trial before they tell me that I don't have the right for that. And due to the fact that I filed for a speedy trial, Devontae did, and my case was dismissed for partially that my speedy trial rights were violated, it makes it even more insane that a district attorney is trying to continue to prosecute Devontae. Because the same thing that dismissed my case applies in his case, yet we're still here fighting for his life.
So I'm sorry, we can talk in a minute. I see the time has come that we need to wrap up today. But we thank you for your attention on this. We will be available here for questions if you have any afterwards. Do we want to blow out the candle? Okay. Oh. We can go? Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, good. So back to another question.
Uh, so I got arrested March 5th, 2018 at 3:45 p.m. That's the same time I was born too, 3:45 p.m. I got arrested March 5th, 2018 at 3:45 p.m. I went to trial in the end of June of 2022. Yeah. Yeah, before I went to trial. Mm-hmm. During COVID was a terrible time. I passed out like 3 times standing. Like people were like falling out. Just we don't know what's going on. Nobody's telling us COVID is a thing. We don't know that. We don't have TV channels for real. There's people coming in and out of here that are getting people sick. We're not being told anything. We didn't know a thing about COVID until the world shut down. So we're in here, people are falling out, people are sick in bed, like going through the worst of the worst, and we have no idea what's going on. Yes, in jail. Mm-hmm. The jail time? The cell? So the cells were, at the time when COVID hit, they were still actively building the new side of the jail. So the tanks that we were in were either 24-man dorms, 16-man dorms, or 12-man dorms. The 24-man dorms would be something like this. It's just very open, and you have bunk beds that are lined against the walls. And then there's like 2 or 3 toilets, 2 showers, just all right there. And then you have tables that people eat at. Very closed in space, no privacy really, nowhere to quarantine. There's nowhere to get away from anything. And that's the biggest cell. The 16-man, even smaller, it's probably like your day room area is probably like from here to there, right? And then the day room, this would be considered a day room, where we eat, where the table is for us to eat, where the phones are, where the TV is, just where you're hanging out. That's the day room. So that would be your day room space. Now, mind you, the day room holds a TV. It holds, depending on how big the tank is, like 2 to 3 tables, the phone, the video visitation thing, the showers, and the toilet. So in this 16-man tank, this is the space that's housing all of that. And then you have 2 bird cages. And the bird cages is what they call them. And the bird cages have 4. Well, they have 8 bunks in each. And it's like just bunks, 4 bunks here. 8 bunks here, 8 bunks here, and that's it. When it's time for us to go to bed, because you have a bedtime in jail. When it's bedtime, you have to go into the bird cage, and then they lock the cage, and you're in there until 4:30 in the morning when you're called out for breakfast. And then you don't eat again until 10:30 in the morning for lunch. And then your last meal is at 4:30 p.m. for dinner. And the portions are not enough to feed an 8-year-old boy. So if you don't have support, you don't have anybody, you can just die in there. Like, the one thing that I hate about being in jail and going through that process, it's made me okay with committing crime.
Say again.
It's made me okay with committing crime. And I'm not saying that to say that I'm going out here committing crimes, because I'm not. But going through that has made me okay with committing crime. It means that if there's a situation where I feel like, man, I got to figure something out, I now have the thought of, well, I can go do something criminal to get this solved. And I'm okay with that. Because that's just how traumatizing that process is. If you're not a criminal, going through the carceral system, going through the court system can turn you into a criminal, especially in my experience, for somebody like me. I'm an immigrant. I was born in Africa. I still remember walking miles with my mom at the age of like 4 or 5 years old. Me and my cousin always pushed me off a bridge. I still remember walking miles with my mom and my aunt. They have these big buckets on their head. We're going to get water. I still remember that. I still remember coming to America on a plane, me and my older brother, he was 9 years old at the time. I was 7, just us. I still remember that, being on a plane by ourselves, super strong accent, going to a whole new world, making it here in Chicago, Illinois, where it's a totally different type of weather than where we were at in Africa. I still remember all that. I still remember going through the school system out there. I still remember my first encounter with police in Chicago. My brother, we were riding our bikes and he gets hit by a cop car and the cop car just keeps going. I remember that. I remember driving to Houston from Chicago thinking, damn, I'm going to have to learn how to ride a horse. I remember those things. I remember my first interaction with police in middle school, my first personal, not witnessing my brother get hit. I remember my first interaction. I'm at a football game. I played sports all my life. We had just came back from an away game. We lost. We're all upset. We're sitting in the stands watching the home game, waiting for that to end so we can leave. As I'm sitting there, I have my pants on, my football pants on. I have Under Armour on. I have my jersey on. I'm just sitting there. And I have some slides on like this. This this officer walks up to me and he's like, "Hey, come here." I'm like, "Okay, what are you doing here?" I'm like, "I'm a student." "No, you're not. Come here." And he walks me and he takes me to his car and I'm walking with him because I'm not. I don't know what's going on. He takes me to the car and he proceeds to try to put me in handcuffs. And I just remember that I'm 11, 12 years old. And I remember just crying, like, and I'm just saying, "Hey, I'm a student. I'm a student." Like, "Hey, what are you doing?" "I'm a student." And I remember my friends coming over there and be like, "Hey, like, look at him. He's still in his football stuff. Like, he goes here." And I remember it having to take a coach to come over there and be like, "Hey, this is one of my players," for this officer to take his hands and his cuffs off me and just be like, "Oh, okay." That was it. I still remember those things, you know? So for somebody like me, growing up the way that I grew up and growing up around people that are 100% okay with committing crime and deciding that, hey, I don't want to do this, and focusing on school and sports as an outlet versus going out here and committing crime, and then going to college, because I played football. I played sports for one reason: to get an education, to get to college. My family's poor. So I started playing sports. I'm like, I'm not going to, we can't afford for me to go to school. I don't know anything about financial aid at the time. Let me get good at sports so I can get to school. So for somebody like me with that mindset of I'm doing everything that I can to go the right way, and then this thing happens, boom. In spite of all of that, this thing happens. And then the first year I'm in jail, I'm angry. I'm very angry. I don't understand. I don't know what's going on. I'm angry. I'm getting abused by guards. I'm getting tasers pulled on me. I'm getting pepper sprayed. I'm getting blamed for things that other people are doing. I spent 60 days in solitary confinement with no commissary privileges, no phone privileges, no visitation privileges. I couldn't call home. I couldn't write anybody. I couldn't see anybody. I was in a very small cell. It's all white, no windows. All you can hear is people with mental illnesses going crazy around you. You can't see a thing. It's just these very small cells. You're in there by yourself. There's no windows. You just hear people screaming. You just hear people crying for help. Hayes County, you hear people crying for help, literally, like, please, get me out of here. That's all you hear. So going through all of that, me being somebody who never had any interest in committing crime and going the wrong route, going through all of that, I am now somebody who is okay with committing a crime. And I believe that's a problem. But that's what this system will do to you, you know?
It's so hard to hear the story of what you went through at this age, the 4 or 5 years, everything. It becomes even more difficult to hear you having had the type of experience since you were 7, since you arrived here. It's just so overwhelming, like Shannon said. I mean, yeah. I forget to breathe because it's so hurtful. It's so, I expect that, are you going, and by the way, rehabilitation is not rehabilitation. I don't understand. People commit crime because they're angry, but even if they weren't, if they get angry, you're going to get angry in prison. So we are actually producing people that are going to commit more crimes for having been. But I'm amazed that there's not a step or a process where someone in court can look at these files and say, hey, this guy has been sitting here for 5 years and they don't push for it. You know, of course we should have that. And of course there's going to be plenty of reasons that people talk back and say why we don't have it. But it doesn't make sense for not being monitoring or oversight that thing. And last week, you're going back to Houston because I want to make sure that you get voted when you run for council. So where will you be living after all this?
Oh, I'm going to stay right here.
Oh, you're going to stay in San Marcos? Wonderful.
I'm the type of person that I face problems head on. So when I do go to court and I see these people, like, not once has anybody said, hey, my bad. You know, not once has anybody just been like, we messed up. You know, when I see these people that were involved in my case, they still look at me as if I'm the devil. Like, they still look at me like, hey, I know you're the guy, you know?
So we're living with a giant criminal that's running for president. And it's just an incredible thing that we're sitting here and hearing these kind of stories when we've all had to put up with so much for almost 10 years now.
But I think back to your
Nazi.
Back to your question about for the courts, the issue is why does this continue so long? Because we elect judges on a partisan basis and we have no freaking clue what they're doing. It's like electing your doctor. What if they hadn't, seriously, would you, well, we're going to vote for this doctor because, you know, it's a popularity contest. We are ruled by fear, and particularly, ironically, in Texas. The more fear mongering, the more I can put you in your place because they are going to get you. And that's that. Look at our border policy. Why do we spend $3, $4, $5 billion on, you know, protecting ourselves against the people who want to come mow your lawn? I mean, you know, that it's the mentality is if they can frighten you. So we elect DAs who I can protect you. I can put people, I'll felonize that. I can keep you safe. And have you seen somebody run for sheriff? I appreciate one of the current candidates for Sheriff Alex Villalobos. I have not seen a picture of him yet with a Stetson. Every sheriff in Texas, in Dallas, when do they ride horseback and need a cowboy hat in Dallas? And they wear the damn cowboy hat, pardon me. But, you know, it's because that's a sign of a strong person that's going to keep you safe. And we do that. The judges are supposed to keep you safe. And yet we pay no attention to these people, what they do. And that gets back into his court watching. Let's watch. Let's see what these judges do. And let's hold them accountable. When they let somebody sit in jail year in and year out, they know better. They're attorneys. They should know the law. And allowing people to sit in court, in jail, without a trial because they have incompetent counsel who don't even show up themselves to court dates quite often. They just don't show up. The judge is like, well, that's bad, but let's just reset it. And they continue to do that because they're not held accountable. The DA's office, and particularly the police, because we know they're all heroes. No, they're human beings and they're going to make mistakes. And we're looking for a chief of police. We're looking for a district attorney. We're looking for judges who will hold our judicial system accountable. And that's what a lot of these programs are about. That's what Mano Amiga is pushing for. And that's why we got a public defender's office, because Mano Amiga says, this is what we need. People who will be held accountable. Yes.
Tell us a little bit about the judicial scorecard. How does that work?
So all it is, the judicial scorecard, all it is just a survey. It has questions curated to how this judge is supposed to do their job. And it's like, hey, was the judge unbiased? Or how did you feel about how the judge handled the defenses, things like that? Yeah, were they respectful, things like that, yeah. Mm-hmm. And to add on to the accountability level for the judges, during my entire trial, my judge was playing Candy Crush on his phone.
Capital murder. Capital murder. He's playing video games during the trial.
He's playing Candy Crush the whole time, and he's trying to rush my defense when my lawyer's trying to defend. He's trying to rush his process, but he lets the prosecutor put on his case for however long he wants. You know, this prosecutor's opening statement, he puts a puzzle piece up with a bunch of pieces missing, and he's like, I want you guys to look at this. The puzzle is a gun because it's all about the optics. They're slowly putting it in your head that this is the person. So it's a gun. There's a bunch of pieces missing. So I want you guys to look at this. You can all tell what that is, right? There's a bunch of pieces missing, but you can still see that there's a firearm. Well, that's what we have here with this case. There's a whole lot that we don't know, but based off of what we think happened, you'll be able to convict Mr. Gray of capital murder. The same prosecutor in his closing argument stood there and jumped up and down, pointing at me, saying, look at him, look at him. He's a murderer. He's a monster. Look at him. He's a monster. You know, and my judge is there playing Candy Crush the whole time.
I think you know. I can tell you. Thank you.
One of my friends was called to testify, and he looks over, and the judge is on his phone playing Candy Crush. He's like, "What's?"
The witness stand.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until my bond hearing that this judge actually started to see me as a person and not a case number or a suspect or just another thing to get through. And the only reason that they started to see me as a person is, for one, the people that were here, but this is the first time that that judge got to get a perspective of who I was, because he was reading these letters from families and friends, things like that. And he's like, wow, I didn't know you were a peer mentor, like all throughout your middle school and high school years. I didn't know you used to go to elementary schools and coach and hang out with these kids that were struggling and do community service. I didn't know that you did this. I didn't know that you were this person. I didn't know that you were that. And then all of a sudden, he started to care more about my situation as a person. But up until that point where he was forced to look at me, I was just another case that he can sit here and play Candy Crush through a trial for. You know?
A lot of people would have just said, I'm going to go back to speech. What do you think really drives you?
I sat in that jail for years, and I watched people that I got to know get their lives taken away from them. Some were justified. Some, they made mistakes and they owned up to the mistake, and they went through the process, and they went to prison for a lot of years that didn't make sense to what the mistake was. But a lot of them were just oblivious to the system. They didn't know any better. They were put in a situation, and they trusted their defense to do right by them. They trusted a judge to do right by them because you're innocent until proven guilty, and they got screwed over. And then once they got screwed over and they got pieces of their actual case and seeing that, dang, I just got, my life is gone, and like for nothing. You know, I sat there and watched these people that I really care about, like very deeply, lose their everything. I sat there on the phone with people, on the phone crying with their family, like, because their family's out here struggling and there's nothing that they can do about it, you know? So that, and I'm just a very hard-headed person. I have a very strong mind, in my opinion. And
Oh, my opinion too.
thank you. And I don't like injustice, you know. And I've never been a runner. I don't run away from things. So I know I can just as easily leave and go start a new life. But I want to stay here and help to fix these injustices. I want to do that, you know. I'm honored to be able to stay here and be a part of a change for those things, because I know what it does to a person. I know what it does to a person's family. And I know what it does to a person's mind, like, you know, so, yeah.
Karen, do you have another question? Wondering if you go and apply for a job now, do you have a record that
I don't, well, it's still on my record. I still have a capital murder charge associated with my name. I'm fortunate I haven't had to apply for jobs since Mono hired me once I came home, but I still have that on my name. Um, I've been pulled over twice since I've been home I like to drive fast, I'm not gonna lie. I've been pulled over twice since I've been home, and both situations were situations where I could have received a warning and got sent on my way. But the moment that my name was ran and they saw capital murder, that whole situation just turned into a life or death situation for me because this officer is going to now handle me as a capital murderer because that's what's on the thing, and he has to make it home. So he's going to handle me accordingly. So I got arrested for something that I could have gotten a ticket for and let on my way. Me and my dog, they arrested my dog. They didn't even let my dog make it because they saw this thing on my name. And the officer like ransacked my car for nothing. And as I'm asking him, like, hey, I didn't give you permission to search my car or anything like that. What are you doing? He goes, well, you were in jail for a long time. You know how this goes. So you're basing the way that you're carrying on right now solely off of the fact that you see that I have a capital murder charge associated to my name. And that's how it is anytime that I'm gonna get pulled over. That's how it's gonna be. They're gonna see that capital murder, you know.
Surely at some point that's gonna be taken off.
No, because the way that my case was resolved, the sneaky way my case was resolved was designed for that to be just that. My case is dismissed pending further investigation. So the DA didn't dismiss my case because it's the wrong guy. We messed up. No, my case was dismissed in a way so that it can stay open in the hopes of finding something to bring me back. That's why Devontae is still being prosecuted, because if we can convict Devontae, then we can bring these charges back up on Cyrus and get the both of them.
And for people who get a record, you get busted, say, for doing something really bad like smoking pot. Unless you pay a lot of money, a couple of $1,000s to get that expunged, and assuming that the DA sets it up in such a way that you can get it, you have to have it removed. Our DA, they've asked about that. Would you consider, having cases where you can dismiss this? And that's kind of where that is. So it's very difficult to get something off of your record. And when you apply for jobs, it'll say you've been arrested for capital murder. Or smoking pot or whatever. I've had kids. I actually got in trouble when I was a district attorney. I dismissed a case. A kid, his parents, he wanted to go to medical school, but he got caught with a joint. And the police busted him, and the parents were mortified. They had, they knew he was going to go on and do great things. And so I said, you know what? Why don't you do 100 hours of community service in an emergency room? And when you're done with that, I will dismiss the case and you can expunge it. And you can deny by law that it's ever happened. Well, the family, unfortunately, a few months after that, sent me a big bouquet of roses as thanks. You're not supposed to thank a prosecutor for letting you off. And so the DA was not really happy with me about, why did you get that? Some people just do that. But for the most part, it's done. They keep your name on the record so they can use it against you in the future. In Europe, that would be, you have a right to privacy. If you haven't been convicted, they won't, first of all, they don't put your face out on the front page in the blotter, the way the San Marcos Record has been known to do. Just because you've been arrested doesn't mean you're guilty. So that's what's going on with that. And it's a challenge. It's all part of the problems we're having with our criminal justice system. The current leadership in the Texas legislature, the governor's office, certainly our attorney general, he doesn't want anything, he wants to prosecute, not be prosecuted. That's his mantra. Right. Yeah. Well, so anyhow, so that's what we do is you go vote. That's always a good thing. And get 2 or 3 people with you when you go to vote. Follow the League of Women Voters. They've got Vote 411 on their website, and you plug in your address and it'll tell you all the people on and the issues on your ballot. Look at those. See who's running for judge, doing all those things. Yes.
About that, I need help in finding out how I can bring 2 or 3 people with me.
Okay.
I've tried that. I don't, and I haven't been, I've always voted alone.
Right.
So how does that work? Or can we set it up so that we actually know people that are not going to go vote?
Well, you know, one thing is if to find other people to go vote, first of all, you can talk to people saying, you know, elections are coming up, early voting starts next week. Are you planning to vote? You can ask people, but you can also work with the League of Women Voters. They do some awesome work in that area and do voter education. They've had vans, depending on where you are, and they'll come by and pick people up and say, we're going to help you vote. So that's a good organization.
I'll do it that way.
Okay.
We're just not voting.
Right. Well, and we've been.
It's not finding people to take to the voting poll.
We're taught that voting is bad in Texas. Right. They don't encourage us.
The lowest percentage of the world.
Right. So yes.
We're a democracy. We're one of the few democracies.
Well, I think we're an oligarchy, but okay, that's fiddling.
No, we're trying to save democracy.
Yeah. Right.
Sorry.
Right. No, I seriously. So yes, I think we've got to wrap up. So last question.
What does accountability look like? You know, we have on the composition to whatever people that are either not following through, or put in jail for too long.
So what does accountability look like on all of these issues and what Mano Amiga has been doing? They are regularly coming to our commissioner's court and saying, we need public defenders because the system as is doesn't work. And they've gotten that. They're saying we need to organize and express our dissatisfaction. We need to elect people like a sheriff who's not going to allow those kind of issues that are currently happening in our jail. What are we doing to change that? Do we want the status quo? That's one person you can vote for, or you can ask for change and then demand it and follow up with it. Somebody says, well, I'm going to do this when I'm elected. Are they still doing that? And so it's coming to the public attention. You can read the Caldwell Hayes Examiner. That's an excellent newspaper now in Hayes County and Caldwell County. And they talk about a lot of these issues, and they will talk about things like court watching and the things that we can do. It's bringing attention to the problems that most people don't know about. They don't know what judges do, and judges get by with stuff. Well, it's putting pressure on the people who are in office until such time as maybe they are voted out. But it's starting up programs to where when you get out of jail, what do? Getting an ID. We had a woman who's actually been to this congregation before who lived with us after 39 years in TDC. And when she left, she didn't have an ID. Now, what can you do in Texas without an ID? You can't get a check. How about that? They promised to give you $50 when you get home, and she couldn't even cash a check. She doesn't have an ID. They didn't provide her with one. They didn't care. Our prison system is a whole other discussion for how horrible that place is. But even coming out of Cyrus's driver's license expired while he was in jail because he was in for so many years. How do you get around? How do you have an ID when it's expired? They don't help you fix that. Even if they let you go and say, oops, our bad, they don't help you get back on your feet. Programs to help people once they get out. If they need health care, what do you do if they need mental health care? We have 68% of the people in the Hayes County Jail are diagnosed with some sort of mental health problem. And that's the same thing in our Texas prisons, and they offer nothing. If you need medication, well, we're not going to, really prescribe you anything. You just go without your meds. That's how we do, because it's a lot cheaper that way. Yes, Louis.
Well, can you explain
about how Mountain View works, if you have mental health challenges, how they address that?
Yeah, so we have a unit in the Texas prison system for women. It houses the women's death row. And if you, for example, this is what they do for all the women and sometimes the men as well. If you say, I want to kill myself, and that happens a lot because women are so, you should be, you're not home with your children. You've abandoned your family. You've done all of these things. So women want to commit suicide. So what they do is they strip them naked. They put them in a cell and turn the air conditioning down to about 62 degrees. And I was told, particularly by a guard at one of these units, that the reason they do that is because when you're that cold, you're not thinking about killing yourself. So that's the mental health treatment in the Texas prisons. Yeah, we got lots of stories with. We don't have time for it here today, but understand this is what we elect. This is our governor who's in charge of that. He appoints the people to run the prisons. He, this is where we are in Texas, and it's up to us to change it. I thank you for your time today. I see we're at time, but one last word.
On another note, when you overcome a case or your case matter is resolved, you get court fees. So let's say you're totally innocent of something, you get accused of something, you go through the process and you're found not guilty or it's dismissed. Well, now you get a letter in the mail to pay for you having to go to court. If you don't pay your court fees, your license gets suspended, and now you have the risk of getting into more criminal charges and things like that. You don't get any help, like she said, with IDs or anything. I came home, again, I'm an immigrant. So when I came home, my residency status was expired. My social security card was never given back to my family from my wallet. Neither was my permanent residency card. All of my information somehow ended up on the dark web the moment SMPD got a hold of my wallet. I went to try to get a driver's license. Oh, we can't give you this license. You need a copy of your social. Go for the social. You need an ID to come get this. I go to try to get my residency card and stuff like that. Well, you need to go get your license and your social and this and the third. So I needed every step where I needed to get something, I needed to get the other thing to be able to do this. And I was fortunate enough to have help. I had Shannon, I had my family, I had Mono, and it was still a nightmare for me. Everybody is not that fortunate to have that type of support. So you can only imagine what it's like for everyone else, you know?
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Now let us extinguish the chalice. May we extinguish this chalice here, that it might flow gently in our hearts. May it guide our path as we leave this place. May it guide our way until we are together again.
Thank you.